Welcome back, everybody. This deep dive, well, it's going to be a pretty personal one, actually.
Oh,
Yeah, we got a chapter sent in from a listener,
okay.
and it's from a memoir.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Hmm.
It's about the author's experience with a pretty serious illness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was during her senior year of high school. So
Oh, gosh. So young.
I know, right? But it goes way beyond, just the medical stuff.
Really?
Yeah, she talks about all these sensory experiences she had
Ah.
and like spiritual reflections and things like that.
Wow, that's pretty powerful stuff, I bet.
It is, and it really makes you think, about how our minds and spirits deal with these really difficult situations.
Yeah, I can imagine, like, how do we cope with those kinds of challenges?
Exactly. So just to give you a little context, where we're at in her story.
Okay.
This chapter takes place during a family trip to Rome,
Rome.
and this is shortly after a hospital stay.
So she's in recovery.
Yeah, she's definitely recovering, but at the same time, you can tell she's doing a lot of soul searching too.
It's interesting, the timing of it all.
Yeah.
Like being on the edge of adulthood, dealing with this health crisis,
Yeah.
and then being in a place like Rome. It's so
I know.
historical and, there's just a certain energy there.
It's palpable.
Totally. You can really feel those layers of experience,
Uh-huh.
Influencing her.
For sure. And this is where things get really interesting. Okay, so she describes these moments,
Okay.
especially when she's going between walking and being carried. Like, she specifically mentions piggyback rides,
Piggyback ride.
and she starts seeing herself from above.
Whoa, what?
Yeah, like she's looking down on herself.
That's wild.
I know, and she's super clear about how vivid these experiences were.
Like, she really believes it.
Oh, she totally does. She talks about seeing herself walking,
Yeah.
like from way up high above the rooftops.
So this wasn't just like her imagination, going crazy.
No, not at all. This
No.
was a real sensory experience for her.
Wow. So it sounds like these weren't just like one-off things either.
Right, they weren't isolated at all. She says these out-of-body moments happened pretty often after she got sick,
Hmm.
especially like whenever she was moving around.
Huh. That almost makes me think about like the act of moving itself, right? Pushing through her physical limitations.
Yeah.
Maybe that was what triggered this like different response in her,
You mean like a shift in perception?
Yeah, exactly. Like a detaching from her physical body,
It really makes you think about the connection between the physical and the well.
the non-physical.
Yeah, and speaking of connections, the setting, Rome adds a whole other layer to this.
Of course.
She talks about how being in the golden rays of the sun, especially when they visited Vatican City, seemed to intensify these experiences.
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
Isn't it?
Vatican City with all that history and spiritual weight.
I know.
It's like the place itself was amplifying these out-of-body sensations.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, if there's something to that.
To what?
That places with that kind of energy, places that have seen so much human experience,
Yeah.
if they can actually impact how we perceive the world around us.
That's a fascinating thought for sure.
I know it's a lot to consider,
It is.
but it's worth it. I think it's worth thinking about.
I agree. Yeah, it really is fascinating to think about like how our surroundings could be shaping our experiences.
Right?
We usually think of out-of-body experiences as this like purely internal thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what she's saying suggests that, maybe external factors like the atmosphere of Rome
Yeah.
could actually play a role too.
Totally. And then there's how the author interprets these events years later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she comes to believe that these weren't just random things happening.
What does she think they were then?
She thinks it was her soul, like, taking flight.
Taking flight.
Yeah, as a way to help her cope with the pain of being sick.
Wow, that's
It's powerful, right?
yeah, it is like her soul was giving her body a break so it could focus on healing.
That's one way to look at it.
What I find really interesting is that she says she felt this lack of control,
Oh, yeah, over her illness and these experiences.
Exactly, both of
Mhm.
them. And that led her to eventually just trust that there was some bigger plan at play.
That must have been a tough thing to go through,
Oh, absolutely.
especially as a teenager dealing with this health crisis and these weird sensations.
Yeah, I mean, emotionally and spiritually, that's a lot to handle on top of everything else.
For sure. And this is where she brings up the idea of the untethered soul.
Untethered soul, huh?
Yeah, it's like a key part of this chapter.
Okay.
And she talks about how even as she was getting better physically, recovering,
Yeah.
she still felt this like persistent sense of detachment, like she wasn't fully connected to her body. So these out-of-body moments weren't just like fleeting things.
Right, it sounds like they had a real lasting effect on how she saw herself.
Totally. Like she had to try and reconcile these two realities.
What do you mean?
Like on one hand, her body was healing, but on the other hand, she still felt this untethered feeling.
Hmm. Like a part of her was still off exploring somewhere else, while another part was stuck, dealing with her illness and recovery.
Exactly. And get this, she says these occurrences became less frequent over time.
Oh, so they did fade.
Yeah. Or maybe she just stopped noticing them as much, but the impact they had?
Oh, yeah, that was still there.
Big time. And think about it. It took her decades to really process and understand what had happened.
That is wild.
It is. It makes you wonder how often we have experiences, and we just kind of file them away.
And never fully grasp what they meant.
Exactly. Not until much later.
I think we all do that, though, right?
Probably.
It's a pretty human thing to do. You run into a situation, especially a tough one, and your mind figures out a way to cope,
To deal with it.
Yeah, to compartmentalize. But then sometimes those experiences come back up.
And you have to figure out what they mean all over again.
Right. And that really speaks to how complex we are, as human beings.
Absolutely. We're physical beings. Yeah. But clearly there's a whole lot more to us than just that.
Definitely. And in this case, her journey of understanding these out-of-body experiences seems really tied to her spiritual growth.
How so?
Well, she talks about like wrestling with her faith and searching for answers.
Yeah.
And eventually coming to her own understanding of what it means to be connected to something bigger than herself.
It sounds like a pretty intense process.
It wasn't a straight line, but she found peace and acceptance in the end.
A trust that things happened the way they were supposed to.
Exactly.
So it was like she had to go through this whole thing, the physical healing, the emotional turmoil, the spiritual searching, just to finally understand those out-of-body moments.
Yeah, and she's not pretending to have it all figured out either.
Oh, good.
She's honest about still having questions, still struggling with the fact that she felt like she had no control.
But she's made peace with it.
It seems like she's integrated those experiences into who she is.
Which brings us back to that idea of the soul taking flight as a coping mechanism.
That's some powerful imagery.
It really is. What do you think she meant by that?
And how does that connect to needing to trust a larger plan?
Yeah.
Well, it could be that our souls, our spirits have this ability to protect us.
To get us through tough times.
Exactly, to help us deal with things we never thought we could handle.
So her soul was like creating space for her body to heal?
Maybe, and that suggests a pretty deep connection between our physical and spiritual selves. We always hear about mind-body connection.
Yeah.
But her story makes you think that maybe there's this whole intricate dance between the body and soul that we don't even realize is happening.
And healing isn't always just about the physical stuff either.
Totally. There's the emotional side, the mental side, and the spiritual side, too.
It's rarely a simple process, is it?
It's messy.
It can take years. Like for her, it took decades to really untangle what happened and figure out what it all meant.
And that's okay.
It is. Her story shows how important it is to stay curious, to not avoid the things we don't understand, even when they make us uncomfortable.
Which is exactly what she did.
Yeah.
She leaned into those experiences even when they were confusing and scary, and in the end, they became part of who she is.
And that's where this untethered soul idea really hits home, I think.
You mean it's not just about feeling lost?
Yeah, it's about facing those hard truths, about digging deep inside yourself and finding a way to anchor yourself back in the present.
It's like you have to lose yourself, experience that detachment to come back to a stronger sense of self.
Exactly. It's a paradox, isn't it?
It is, but it shows just how complicated being human really is.
We all want to understand ourselves, right?
Of course.
But figuring ourselves out, it's rarely straightforward.
And sometimes it takes these crazy experiences like the ones in this chapter.
To shake things up.
Yeah, to get us to see the world in a new way.
Her story makes us question everything we thought we knew about reality, about consciousness, about what's possible when it comes to healing and transforming.
It's a reminder that even when we feel totally lost, untethered, there's always hope for finding our way back.
Back to ourselves.
Back to our bodies, to our spirits, to a deeper connection with everything around us.
It's amazing to think back to that trip to Rome.
Yeah.
With all the churches and historical sites and that energy you can just feel there.
Yeah.
And those piggyback rides, when, her being carried like that.
Right.
Those moments of vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's almost as if it all came together to create the perfect setting for these experiences to happen.
I see what you mean. Like maybe the external world was kind of mirroring what was going on inside her.
Exactly. And Rome itself, with all its history and spiritual significance,
Yeah.
maybe it was like a catalyst, for her to explore those parts of herself. And it's so interesting that these out-of-body moments mostly happen during those transitions.
You mean between walking and being carried?
Yeah, like when she was shifting from one state to another.
Huh. Almost like those moments opened up a different way of seeing things.
Right, and I really appreciate how honest she is about it all.
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't try to come up with some big explanation or force it to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
She just acknowledges the mystery, the uncertainty.
Yeah, she doesn't shy away from the fact that she still has questions, even after all this time.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, don't you think?
It does. It leaves us with more questions than answers.
Which is what a good deep dive should do.
I agree. It gets us thinking,
It makes us look at our own experiences, our own beliefs.
and how we make sense of the world.
Exactly. It challenges us to be open to the possibility that there's more to life than we realize.
That maybe our consciousness can do things we haven't even imagined.
So as we wrap up here,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what does all this mean for you listening?
Good question.
What do you think about these out-of-body experiences?
Yeah. Are they just a way of coping? Are they spiritual? Something else entirely?
Ooh, no.
Right. There's no one right answer.
And that's the beauty of it.
The author's story is like a jumping off point.
For us to explore our own ideas.
Yeah. For us to think about these mysteries ourselves.
It reminds us that everyone's journey is different,
For sure.
that there's no one path to understanding who we are.
And sometimes the most profound insights come from those moments when we embrace the unknown.
Yeah, from sitting with those uncomfortable questions.
Exactly. By being curious, by questioning,
By pushing the boundaries of what we think we know.
you can find new depths within ourselves.
And a deeper connection with the world. Well, this deep dive has taken us on quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
Exploring this woman's incredible story.
Of illness healing and those amazing out-of-body experiences.
We've talked about how physical challenges and spiritual awakening can intersect,
The power of place and environment.
and the impact these experiences have on how we see ourselves.
But maybe the most important thing we're left with,
Is a sense of wonder,
a renewed curiosity about consciousness.
an invitation to keep exploring, to keep asking questions.
To keep diving deep.
Because the journey of discovery never really ends, does it?
It doesn't.
There's always something new to learn
More to understand.
about ourselves and the universe we live in. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.